Chapter 6. Hidden away several stories below the dojo, in the mansion's deepest sub-basement, was appropriately enough quiet as a tomb. Marble benches lined the narrow chamber, facing what appeared to be a blank stone wall. A single large mirror adorned the polished granite. The high vaulted ceiling gave the room the feel of some somber Gothic cathedral. Celine shivered as she entered the chamber. By design, the air-conditioned viewing room was kept at a temperature uncomfortably cool even for the undead. Her footsteps echoed hollowly in the spectral hush as she strolled up to the mirror and stared pensively at her reflection. Her expressionless face belied the turbulent thoughts and anxieties rolling inside of her. Everything is happening too fast, she worried. 2 vampires dead, on the very eve of the awakening. An electronic buzz greeted her arrival, and seemingly opaque mirror instantly turned transparent, revealing a security booth on the other side of the glass. A single vampire, whose name was Duncan, manned the booth. He raised a quizzical eyebrow and Celine nodded in assent. Knowing why she was there, Duncan hit a button on the control panel. The remainder of the stone wall split in half, sliding away to expose a thick plexiglass window. Underneath, Celine stepped forward and peered through the glass as the shadowy chamber beyond. Darkly lit and cavernous, the crypt was slowly beating heart of Aldegaz. Polished granite stepped down into the sunken area that was easily visible from the viewing room. At the centre of this lower tier, housed within a concentric pattern of interwoven Celtic circles, were 3 shining bronze hatches embedded on the floor. Each circular hatch had been ornately engraved with a single letter. A for Amelia, M for Marcus, and V for Victor. Celine stared at the letter hatch with anguished eyes. She leaned against the plexiglass barrier separating her from her sire's tomb. Her cool breath steamed the even more frigid glass. How I wish I could awaken you, my lord, she thought. For how lonely I am, in need of your strength and wisdom. We all are. The lengthy corridor was lined with marble busts commemorating many of the Coven's greatest warriors and leaders. This effort to immortalize the great and near great was a tad superfluous, given that the individuals being honoured were already blessed with eternal life. But even vampires can have egos, and hurt feelings. Erica stormed down the empty hallway, biting down on her lower lip so hard that she tasted blood. The other servant girl, Dominique, had scurried away on another errand, but Erica barely noticed her associate's departure. Her bruised heart still ached from Craven's casual disregard. His harsh, indifferent tone rang in her ears. How could he just dismiss me like that? She agonized. Doesn't he know I would do anything for him? If she were honest with herself, Erica would have to admit that her attraction to Craven was only partially inspired by the autocratic vampire's undeniable good looks and charisma. His lofty position in the Covenant appealed to her just as much as his irresistible physique and features. As a relative newcomer to the Coven, less than a mortal lifetime old, Erica was stuck at the bottom of the vampiric pecking order, and she could think of no faster way to climb the ladder than by attaching herself to the most powerful Nosferatu in all of Europe. Although born human, unlike the pure-blooded elders, Craven was still a vampire to be reckoned with, and Erica had spent many a long day sequestered away from the sun in the modest servants' quarters she shared with 4 or 5 other vampire newbies, fantasizing about reigning over the manor as Craven's royal consort. But all he cares about is that cold-hearted killing machine Celine. A bust of Craven's caught her eye, his regal profile captured in the chiseled stone. She swerved purposely one side, knocking the bust off its pedestal. The sculpted head crashed to the floor, exploded into a zillion pieces. Snow-white shards of broken marble went skittering everywhere. Not so handsome now, are you, my lord? A moment of vindictive glee gave way to alarm as she realized exactly what she had done. She stopped in her tracks and looked back at the frightful mess on the floor. In a panic, she scampered back and dropped to her knees beside the remains of the bust. Looking about her furtively but hastily, began sweeping the incriminating fragments behind the concealing folds of a large hanging tapestry. Crimson tears leaped from her eyes as her anguished soul rebelled at the cruel injustice of it all. Why Celine? She wondered bitterly, torn between despair and indignation. Why not me? Celine was still gazing sadly at Victor's tomb when Erica slipped into the viewing room behind her, one of Craven's adoring acolytes. The older vampiress noted distantly. She didn't bother turning around. It's a waste of time, you know, the servant girl said. a few moments later after waiting in vain for Celine to acknowledge her presence. "What is?" Celine asked. She remained facing the crypt to her back to the lissom blonde vampiress, whose name was Erica if she recalled correctly. Summoning up the nerve, Erica crept up next to the preoccupied warrior woman. She motioned casually at the metal hatch marking Victor's secluded resting place. "I seriously doubt Victor wants you freezing your ass in here, staring at his tomb for hours on end." For the first time, Celine turned to look directly at the other woman. "No," she agreed vehemently. "He'd want me and the death dealers out there right now scouring every square centimetre of this city." She clenched her fist at her sides, giving vent to her frustrations. "Damn Craven! He's a bureaucrat, not a warrior." "What's the difference?" Erica asked cheekily. "He'd still be a prick." The girl's flippancy caught Celine by surprise, forcing her to take a closer look at this puzzling baby vampire. Perhaps she's a bit more brains and independence than I first assumed. "But then again," Erica said, flashing a wicked grin as she leaned languidly against the thick plexiglass window, "he is quite the devilish handsome prick." There's no accounting for taste, Celine thought, mentally lowering her restoration of Erica by a notch. "Trust me," she said drearily. "He's all yours." A pained expression passed over the blonde vampiress's face, indicating that Celine had touched a sore spot, but Erica quickly managed to force a smile. "Come on," she said lightly. "We need to get you ready." Celine blinked in confusion. She had absolutely no idea what Erica was referring to. "For what?" The petite maidservant rolled her eyes as if she didn't believe Celine could be so close. "The party? Amelia's envoy will be here any time now." "Oh, that," Celine thought without much enthusiasm. Her gaze drifted to the bronze hatch marking Amelia's tomb, which was unoccupied. In theory, the female elder would take her place in the crypt upon Marcus's awakening, but Celine would have preferred a very different transition of power. If only we could skip ahead 100 years and wake up Victor instead. Rats and spiders scurried away from a cooling body, frightened by the alarming sound of something large and powerful advancing through the mouldy, draining tunnel. Although the rain momentarily had ceased falling on the city streets above, oily puddles remained, scattering around the sewer as evidence of deluge. Massive paws smashed against the stagnant pools of brim water, mixed with the sounds of bony claws scraping against the brick-lined floor of the tunnel. Trickles of light filtered down through the rusty grates in the ceiling, throwing the shadow of an enormous beast upon rough, uneven ground. Bones snapped and twisted noisily, further disturbing the venomous denizens of the sewers, as a grotesque metamorphosis took place in the murky shadows. Dense fur rustled scratchily as it receded into almost hairless brown hide. Feral snarls evolved into recognizable human grunts and moans. Man-shaped once more, Ray staggered through the dank and decaying tunnel. His naked body was streaked with blood, and 4 jagged silver-throwing stars which lodged painfully in his chest, sending shearing jolts through his body with every step he took. He reached instinctively to remove the stars, only to yank back at his hand as the cursed metal singed his fingertips. "Damn silver," he thumped silently, licking his scalded fingers. "Vein-sucking vampire bitch." Newly human eyes adjusted to the gloom. Ray's panted loudly like a dog, exhausted by both his injuries and the awful strain of his transformation. He had tried to catch up with the stinky blood who had killed Trix, but her fucking shuriken had slowed him down, allowing the blood-sucking tramp to escape. Now there was nothing left to do but collect Trix's body and report back to Lucian, who was not going to be happy to hear that the Bloods had interfered with the mission. For a second, Ray's worried about the larger implications of the vampire's surprise appearance tonight. Just another random hunting expedition? Or did the goddamn Bloods know about Lucian's interest in that mole, Michael Corvin? "No," he decided quickly. "That's impossible. The Bloods have no idea what we're all about. Our mole would have told us if they did." Confident that tonight's confrontation was just an inconvenient setback, and not any sort of preemptive strike on the part of the vampires, Rays felt more positive about the tune. There would be time enough to track down the Corvin again. Right now, he had another chore to do. He lurched down the tunnel, occasionally reaching out with his hands to steady himself. Slime coated his palms and oozed down his arms as he returned to the blood-spattered stench of the tunnel, where he had found the despicable vampiress, bending over the lifeless form of his fallen pack brother. Trix was right there when Rays had left him, lying sprawled on his back in a puddle of gory muck, his human face frozen in agony. A trail of bloody entrance wounds stretched across Trix's chest, leaving little doubt about his cause of death, The Lycan's own gun was missing, Ray's noticed glumly. He threw back his head and howled in rage and lamentation. Trix was the only latest Pat member to fall prey to the Bloods and their filthy silver. Rays couldn't wait to catch up with the dark-haired she-vamp again and make her prey for Trix's untimely demise. He stared down at the bullet-riddled corpse with blood in his eyes. Could be worse, he consoled himself, blood oozing from his chest. The silver-scarred lycanthrope bent over and, grunting in pain, hefted the dead man up into his arms. At least we killed 2 of the Bloods tonight. Twice the number of wolves claimed by the vampire bitch. He could still taste the tangy meat of that careless male blood between his jaws. Well, their new ultraviolet ammunition had performed exactly as promised, roasting the other male vamp from the inside out. 2 of them to 1 of us, he reflected savagely. Not a bad outcome. He just hoped Lucian felt the same way. Struggling under the weight of his doleful burden, Rays retraced his steps through the ancient sewer system, heading deeper. Celine's room at the mansion was almost as Spartan as the dojo upstairs, although her elevated status in the Coven entitled her to a roomy suite of her own, complete with a balcony looking over the front yawn. The actual furnishings were on the sparse side. A modern-looking steel desk gave her a place to work, while richly upholstered divan allowed her to rest her head while she felt like taking a break. A portrait of a human family consisting of a mother and father and 2 daughters and a pair of twin girls occupied a position of honor upon the desk. The framed photos served as a both keepsake and inspiration, reminding Celine of what she hated the werewolves in the first place. As if she could forget. Moonlight entered her office through the balcony window, casting a pale blue shadows on the stark white carpet, covering the floor. The ceaseless rain spattered against the window panes. Celine sat at her desk, staring intently at the illuminated screen of her laptop, which now held the desk from Rigel's digital camera. Still clad in her fighting leathers, she clicked rapidly through the surveillance photos Rigel had taken not long before his shocking demise. Her lips peeled away from her fangs and she hissed venomously at the sight of the 2 murderous Lycans in their street clothes. If only I could have exterminated both of you, she thought, gripped by an insatiable hatred that she knew no relief. It would have taken more than the blood of just a single Lycan to average the death of a death dealer. Erica passed behind her, holding up an elegant dress. The turquoise gown, a hand-beaded silk georgette imported directly from Paris, had been fitted to Celine's exact measurements, which conveniently had remained unchanged for generations. The eager young maidservant had followed Celine's back to their headquarters, apparently at Craven's instructions. Celine wished that Craven were as concerned about the Lycan's suspicious activities as he was about tonight's big reception. The blonde vampiress strolled up at a chromic-scented mirror mounted on the stark white wall. She posed before the mirror, holding up the clingy embroidered gown in front of her. Oh yes, Erica said girlishly. You should definitely wear this one. It's perfect. She did a graceful twirl before the mirror, then added under her breath, maybe too perfect. Even concentrating on the digitized photos, Celine couldn't miss the undercurrent of envy in the younger vampiress's voice. Erica was decades away in both power and prestige from wearing such posh attire. The servant girl's own flimsy little frock was considered cheaper and more tawdry, making Erica look more like a London showgirl than an undead aristocrat. The girl's jealousy was the least of Celine's concerns, however, as the zealous death dealer searched the digital images for some clue to the Lycan's mission in the city. Where had they intended to take the metro to? She wondered, having no doubt that the roaming Lycans were up to no good. There's something afoot. A head of sopping brown hair, attached to an attractively guileless face, caught her eye. That's odd, she thought, recognizing the good-looking American she had noticed back in Fenric Square. To her surprise, the handsome youth showed up in more than a few of the photos earlier that night. Although often out of focus or consigned to the fringes of the photo, the nameless American was nonetheless a continual presence in images flashing across her screen. A coincidence, Celine wondered, or something more? Closing her eyes, she searched her own memories. In her mind, she saw once again the young man hurrying through the soaking downpour, then riding the crowded escalator down the subway platform, followed moments later by now she realized by Rays and Trix, stalking through the throng of the commuters with a malignant purpose, like hungry wolves tracking the next meal. She remembered the smaller Lycan charging at the young American with outstretched claws. Her dark eyes snapped open. They were after you, she murmured, suddenly comprehending. But why? Gripped by a renewed sense of urgency, she feverishly worked her laptop's keyboard and mouse, quickly selecting the best photo of the unnamed pedestrian. She enlarged the image and adjusted the focus. The youth's chiseled features came into sharp relief, confirming that she was indeed the same individual she had noticed back in the city. Some form of ID badge was clipped to his jacket, and she zoomed in on the small laminated rectangle which turned out to be a hospital employee badge bearing the name Michael Corvin. Celine leaned back in her chair, staring speculatively onto the warm brown eyes of the mysterious stranger. "Who are you, Michael Corvin?" she pondered, resting her chin on steepled fingers. "And why were those Lycans after you?" She had lost track of Corvin once shooting started, but doubted that he had ended up in the subway tunnels with her and Reyes. Celine remembered the gratifying sound of her silver throwing stars smacking into the werewolf's hairy chest. Chances were the injured beast had been forced to abandon his prey, at least for the time. Probably off licking his wounds somewhere, she guessed. But for how long? Although she couldn't explain why, Celine knew that it was vitally important that she locate Michael Corvin before Reyes and his Lycan compatriots did. He meant more than just fresh meat to those wolves. He's cute," Erica commented, peeking over Celine's shoulder. Celine had briefly forgotten that the servant girl was still in the room. For a human. "Who's cute?" a third voice asked. Both Celine and Erica looked up to see Cravens resplendent in a black Armani suit, standing in the doorway. An irked, petulant expression compromised his dashing appearance. For herself, Celine impressed a flare of irritation at the intrusion. Craven hadn't felt it necessary to knock first. Erica, on the other hand, immediately went into humble servant mode. Lowering her eyes, she bowed demurely and shuffled out of the room with minimum of fuss, and ducking beneath Craven's arms as she passed through the door into the hallway outside, leaving Celine alone with Craven. Without waiting for invitation, he sauntered into Celine's private quarters, his hands clasped behind his back. He strolled over to the balcony window and peered out into the stormy night. "Need I remind you," he said peevishly, "that we're expecting important guests?" "No," Celine archly. "Erica's done that at least 20 times in the past hour." Craven turned away from the window, flashing her a wounded look. "Then why haven't you slipped into something more befitting?" He glanced at the empty silk gown, which Erica had left draped on the divan. "You know I was planning to have you at my side this evening." Celine could not think of less appealing prospect, even if she didn't have more important matters to attend to. "I'm not in the mood," she declared. "Take Erica, she's just dying to be at your side." Craven grinned, evidently amused by the servant girl's hopeless infatuation. He walked over to where Celine was sitting, then leaned down towards her, bringing his ruddy face much too close for her liking. "I'm sure she is," he whispered. "But everyone knows you I desire." So what else is new? Celine thought, wary beyond measure of Craven's advances. They had played this scene far too many times in the past. You'd think after all these years you'd take the hint. His breath, hot and reckoning of plasma, was unpleasantly warmed upon her cheek. He moved to kiss her, but she deftly edged away from him at the last minute, a trick she had sadly had to cause to perfect over the decades. Craven bristled at her rebuff, stiffly raising himself to his full height and throwing back to his linoleum black mane, scowling. He swept a disdainful eye over her muddy boots, still besmirched by the grimy souvenirs from the Budapest mouldering sewer system. "If you ask me, you would take the entire warrior business a bit too seriously." He glanced at framed family portrait resting on her desk. "You can't undo the past, no matter how many Lycans you kill." His callous gaze left slimy imaginary tracks across the precious portrait. "You do realize this, don't you?" Celine shot him a warning look. He was coming dangerously close to trespassing upon sacred ground. Perhaps, realizing that he had gone too far, he backed off a bit. He smiled amiably, as if to undo the sting from the sarcastic query. "And besides," he continued, taking less of a confrontational track, "what's the use of being immortal if you deny yourself the simple pleasures of life?" "Hard to enjoy those pleasures," she reflected, more daintily, "while a Lycan is tearing out your throat and making a feast of your intestines." She took a deep breath, not wanting to refight old battles. "Maybe I should make the most of Craven's presence while I actually have his attention." She pointed at the enhanced photo on the computer screen. "Do you see this human?" Now it was Craven's turn to sigh impatiently. He took a moment to inspect his well-manicured nails, which were apparently one of the more interest to him, than the last moments of two death dealers. What of him? I can't be positive, she began, but I'm beginning to think the Lycans... Craven cut her off as a sudden glow of headlights flashed across the window. Celine realized the Soren had arrived with visiting dignitaries, with the New World Coven. Damn, she thought. Their guest timing could not have been worse. Just when I was about to tell Craven my theory. Craven beamed happily. His truculent mood instantly lifted. Now please, put on something absolutely stunning and be quick about it. His chest expanded beneath his elegant evening wear, like a rooster starting in a hen yard. I have a glorious evening planned. You'll see. He headed for the exit, but Celine had not yet given up on the idea of sharing her concerns regarding the Lycans. For better or for worse, he was designated leader of the coven, and he needed to hear this. Craven, this is serious, she called after him. I think the enemy was following him. He paused in the doorway and looked back at her with a puzzled look on his face, as if he had just heard a bad joke whose punchline he didn't quite understand. That's absurd, he said. Other than food, why would Lycan stalk a mere human?